have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock.
Hello. Thank you so much for listening to the Bold Moves podcast. I am Mandy Bryce and I am the host, and I am super excited to share with you this episode, number 265, with Kristin Jones, who is an eating disorder coach who discovered that based on her own experiences in discovering that she had suffered from addiction and eating disorders and leaving her career as a teacher to blaze her own trail and help others in the process. Without further ado, here is my interview with Kristin Jones.
Hello, everyone. Today I am chatting with Kristin Jones. Welcome to the show, Kristin.
Thank you, Mandy, so much. I'm so honored to be here. I'm a fan of yours, so thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much. The pleasure is all mine. You know that the show is called Bold Moves, and you wouldn't be here if you hadn't taken some risks somewhere in your journey. So I would love it if you would share who you are and some of those bold moves that you've made, your story.
Absolutely. And again, thank you so much. That's a great question. It's a great way to start. So my journey to where I am started, well, probably about, I'm going to say 12 years ago. I was a school teacher, and I was a school teacher for 17 years. I loved teaching. I love kids. I taught middle school. I know most people, when I say I was a middle school teacher, they cringe and, oh my gosh, how did you do that? But I absolutely love middle school. To me, it's the best years. And I was really enjoying what I was doing, but I kept finding myself going off, having these side gigs that I always needed to have something on the side that was, whether it was just for fun or additional income. And so I was doing house sitting, and I was tutoring, and I had a baking business. And so I was doing all of these different things. And finally I started to think, maybe this isn't where I'm supposed to be, because sometimes I always thought you got into a job and you stayed in that job forever until you retired. Both my parents were teachers. And so I just thought it was just the natural thing. I couldn't imagine not having summers off. That just didn't even seem possible that I could comprehend that. Yeah. And so it took a while for me to finally come to the place of thinking, okay, I'm not really happy, and I'm trying to make this work, but it's not working anymore. And so I had already gotten a personal training certification, and I was knowing I was moving in that direction. I had gotten a certification to teach a certain type of group fitness class. So
Which class, out of curiosity?
Inferno Hot Pilates.
Oh, I'm not familiar. I understand hot Pilates, but I've never heard of Inferno.
Oh, Mandy, we got to get you in. They're awesome classes. They're done in Bikram Yoga Studios, 100-degree.
Nope.
I say hot, and people are like,
heat. No, I wanted to. I've taken Bikram like 10 or 15 times, and heat and I just don't mix very well. If I do Bikram, regardless of what time of day, even if I start eating like salty food and drinking tons and tons of water and Gatorade days before to prepare, I still get an exertion headache, and the whole rest of my day is done. Yeah. So I've tried even like, okay, well, I'll just do the 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. class and go straight to bed after. And even then it's like searing headache and game over. So it's just not for me. It sounds so amazing and I want to love it, but my body's like, nope.
Yeah, exactly. So I started doing that, and I was really recognizing that I was looking more forward to the end of the school day where I got to go to my second job. Yeah. And so I went on a cruise with my sister, and about 3-4 summers ago, and had time to do some reading and reflecting. And I read the most life-changing book for me, which is Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass. And it's just, that book just it opened my eyes to the fact that I didn't have to follow a path that I thought was the right path for me, or what everyone in my family thought was the right path for me, or that was comfortable and safe, and that I needed to do what was authentic to me and what was really calling in my heart. Yeah. And so I went back and told my principal the second week of school, this is going to be my last year, and had no clue as to what I was going to do. But I knew I wanted to do training. I wanted to be a wellness coach, but I didn't know what that was going to look like.
Yeah.
And so the end of the school year came around, and I took a year leave of absence and really tried to start an online business, had no clue as to what I was doing, and got with an amazing business coach, and everything kind of took off from there. But it was the single scariest thing to have to explain to my parents why I was like, you're leaving a tenured position and you have retirement and you're going and going to do what now? What exactly are you going to do? And so, but my parents absolutely are the most amazing, amazing people. And they just, as long as you're happy, we just want you to be happy. And so that was the most important thing, was that I was going to be happy. And that was, and I am. I could not be any happier in what I'm doing. And it's evolved in the last 2 years. I'm almost at the 2-year mark with my business. And it's just, and I'm sure you know this too, when you start your business, it looks one way and then it evolves and it changes. And I don't even know how many variations of business cards I have, because it always looks different, but I could not be happier with the decision that I made, but it was so scary to do that. And I remember thinking briefly, there was probably only one time in the last 2 years that I thought, gosh, did I do the right? And then I stopped myself and I said, no, you did, because you're so content with what you're doing. And that outweighs the stability. It outweighs the stability, because I am truly living and doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I know that's what I was meant to do on this earth. So
I love that. So we're on to purpose. What exactly is it that your career has evolved to in the last couple of years, and that you're living your purpose?
Well, I developed an eating disorder when I was about 16 years old, but my issues with food probably go way back to when I was probably 6 or 7 years old.
Wow.
And I have had to, it was really not funny. Well, it was kind of funny after the fact, but I was doing a Facebook Live, and I get on Facebook Lives and I start talking, and I was doing a Facebook Live, and I started talking about how I would never wish an eating disorder on anyone ever, because for me, it's been the hardest thing for me to deal with. I've lost a sibling. I've had some hard times in my life. This has been the thing that has been the biggest challenge, but it has been the biggest blessing for me as well, because it has shown me that I was meant. I don't believe that anything is done to you, it's done for you. And so this was given to me so I could then in turn share what I've experienced, share how I've dealt with it, and give that to other people and let them know, one, that they're not alone, and two, that there's hope, and I want to be inspiration to people, that they can come out of these very difficult, trying situations, especially when it comes to dealing with food.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So what does that end up being for you career-wise?
Well, I have written a book.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I self-published it. It was one of those things where if you had asked me 6 months ago, and I was an English teacher, and I loved teaching writing, but if you had asked me if I ever wanted to write a book, no, there'd be no way I was ever going to write a book. Too long process. No way, I would never do it. And back in December, I went to an entrepreneurial conference in San Diego that was put on by Hal Elrod of The Miracle Morning. And we were doing a guided meditation, and he was leading, as his business partner was leading 500 people in this guided meditation, and talking about, it was all about your business being your heart's purpose, and and what you were meant to do, and what are you good at. And we were being led through this visualization, and I had never known what the words were to my particular eating disorder, because I wasn't anorexic and I wasn't bulimic. And all of a sudden it was one of those things where out of the sky came the words emotional eating, and they had never been on my radar before.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote them down. I had my eyes closed and I wrote them down in my notebook, and I didn't even know I did it. And then I opened up, well, he said, okay, everybody open up your eyes. And I looked down at my notebook, and there were the words. And it was just, this feeling came over me, like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, this is where my business is going. Like the emotional eating, it's so who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I just need to help people with that. So that's where it's gone. So I wrote a book, and I have a wellness coaching business. I do a mixed hybrid of online and in person. I train people both. I do fitness training as well as nutrition, but my real passion and my real heart is in dealing and helping people manage emotional eating.
Okay.
And so I do one-on-one coaching, as well as I have a group program that I take people through. And in that case, you have the camaraderie of, 30 other people in a Facebook group, and everybody's in the same place and dealing with similar issues. And there's such power and sisterhood when you can be, or just that camaraderie when you can be with other people who know what you're talking about and know the struggles that you've had.
Sure, absolutely. So for someone who's not familiar with the term emotional eating, how would you describe it?
Absolutely. Thank you. It's a great question. So
Yeah.
emotional eating is using food to comfort your emotions. So however you're feeling, you're using food as a vehicle, very similarly to the way people use drugs and the way people use alcohol and sex and gambling, to mask and to not address emotions that they're having. And it can be to distract, it can be to, again, to comfort or to soothe. Oftentimes people use to distract themselves because they don't want to deal with whatever the emotion that's in the present moment, or oftentimes it can also be when you don't feel comfortable expressing your emotions.
Okay.
And so instead you have all of this bottled up inside of you, and to keep it in, you put things, you kind of mat it down by just feeding yourself, and it becomes mindless. It becomes very just something that people are oftentimes not even aware of. And it can really it can really wreak havoc, because you have this thing outside of yourself that's then creating all of this turmoil within your life, and you don't know, you it's not like drugs or alcohol. You can't get rid of it. We have to deal with food. We have to learn to work and have a relationship with food, and for many people that's really, really challenging.
Yeah, especially because unlike drugs or alcohol, where you have to really go out of your way to find things. I mean, I guess you don't necessarily have to go super out of your way to find alcohol, or I live in California, depending on what you're looking for. Drugs are also not that hard, but they're not everywhere like food is, where, you're maybe, even if you're just dieting or trying to be mindful of what you're eating, if you work somewhere and it's someone's birthday and they bring a cake, there's that temptation potentially right there.
Sure.
How does it, where does it draw the line where, because I'm sure that pretty much everyone uses emotional eating in some way. I wouldn't say that I have a huge issue with it, but there's definitely been like, okay, this was definitely a bad Monday, and maybe I'm going to, have a piece of cheesecake, or same thing with like a glass of wine. With emotional eating, where is it where it's like, okay, this isn't just normal, like I had a rough day, I deserve a treat type thing. It's, I need help, or it's an issue.
Right. Well, it really depends on, and you're right. Everyone at some point in their life, everyone has responded to an emotion or to a circumstance and have used food to comfort themselves. That's just, it's kind of who we are as human beings.
Yeah.
But where it becomes an issue is when it's on a repetitious basis, and it becomes an all-consuming thought. It becomes something that you start to become almost obsessive about. You start to think about a lot. Oftentimes what happens is there's a very strong correlation between emotional eating and people who are either unable to lose weight or they can't maintain their weight. But there's also the other extreme. There's also the people who are of normal weight, and they are food has become kind of the enemy, and they've developed a very unhealthy relationship with food and use food in a way that's not, I always deem as not appropriate. But food becomes something different when you start to think of food as something different than just something to fuel your body. That's when it starts to cross the line, and it becomes something that's disruptive to your life. That's when it becomes a problem.
Okay, interesting. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I don't think I've ever thought of food as something to fuel my body. Like, I know that's what it does, but I'm also a bit of a foodie, and like,
right. Exactly.
I want
And
it to be delicious.
absolutely. And so do I. And I think that I think that there's also that mindlessness component. And I think when we're not, because it sounds like when you were describing, a bad Monday and having a piece of cheesecake, you're very aware of that was why you had the cheesecake, that it was the response. It's when we don't realize that that's what's happening. We don't realize that it's 10 o'clock at night, and every night at 10 o'clock, we make ourselves a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, whether we're hungry or not. That's when it becomes kind of an issue. One of the other things that is a real telltale sign of a problem that you may be flirting with the line of what is emotional eating, and that it might be an issue, is for people who either can't recognize or are unable to determine when they are actually physically hungry or not. That becomes a huge piece. There are many people who eat when they're not hungry and do that all the time. Like they've lost that feeling of, am I genuinely hungry, or is this about something else? And when it's about something else, and there's no reason for any of us to eat all day long. Right. And so it's when that becomes a problem, when it's that I'm always hungry. Well, you might think you're always hungry. Physically, you might not be hungry, but you've got something else going on.
That makes sense. I'm curious where the line goes on the other end as well. So, of course, being in the health and fitness space, or having that as an interest, I've seen the meme that it's like, don't treat yourself, you're not a dog, or something like that, where it's the idea of like, all right, food shouldn't necessarily be used as a celebration or reward either.
Right.
What can you expand on that more? Is that also emotional eating? If you're like, if you're a realtor and you sold a house and you celebrate with a steak, or, I love cheesecake. So cheesecake.
I would think in my opinion, I would say it's more how the person feels about it. I think for every person, it's going to be different. Yeah. So I think it's, if you're celebrating something and you go out and have, that to me is an awesome thing. And you want to have those celebratory, because you're sharing it with friends, you're having something great happen. It's when it's the negative, and instead of the other alternative of like talking to somebody or journaling or, working it out with whomever the person is that you're upset with, when you then decide, I don't want to deal with these emotions, because really when you're celebrating, you are in the emotion, you are celebrating and you're feeling good. But when you're choosing to avoid a feeling that you don't want to deal with, that's when it becomes that, because we all know when we keep things bottled up inside of us, that's ripe for disease, that's ripe for illness. And so it's really more about expressing emotions and making sure that whatever it is that you're doing it with a clear heart. And so, have the piece of cheesecake. But if that's, if you've had your say and you've done whatever it is that you've done and it's great or it's not great, as long as you've gotten out what you need to get out emotion wise, have at it. I am not a person, I've never believed in, restrictive, because that is one of the signs that, and it's something I have done most of my life, is, I'm going to be vegan, or I'm going to be keto, or I'm going to be, so it's like always having control of your food. That's another kind of red flag that might be a problem.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was curious. Like, I have a few friends who have survived different eating disorders, and I've learned a little bit more about them. And then being, again, someone who is very into health and fitness, have learned that the other, or an extreme of that, would be orthorexia, which is I guess I don't even know the exact definition. I could just kind of describe the idea as just like kind of being so obsessed with eating healthy that it becomes problematic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious because sometimes I see people who are like, okay, I, don't really want to comment on your post because it's kind of triggering and problematic for me. Have you noticed that with having survived an eating disorder yourself, that being in the fitness and nutrition space can sometimes be difficult and potential to like err into that orthorexia area, or where would that line go for you?
I think that's a great question, and it's really interesting because I have noticed since I released my book,
Mm-hmm.
I have spoken to a number of people about doing guest blogs or coming on podcasts,
Sure.
and I really see, and I don't know if you've seen this, but I have really noticed there's been such a movement away from talking about weight loss, that weight loss has almost become like the taboo subject now in certain aspects of the health and fitness field, that people really want to. It's more about body acceptance. It's more about being, comfortable with who you are, which I am very much a proponent of. But at the same time, and always with the mindfulness of health being the most important thing,
Right.
and making sure that that your blood pressure is good and your heart's strong and all of those things. But it's very, very easy. And I truthfully think that a lot of people who have these types of predispositions oftentimes are drawn to the health and fitness industry because we kind of want answers. We kind of want to we know there's a problem, or we know there's something in it, and if we could just get it right, everything. And what happens is we're looking at the wrong place. We're looking outside of ourselves, and really what we need to do is work on the inside and figure out what's going on. It has nothing to do with the health and fitness industry. It has nothing to do with all the exercise in the world. It's why are you doing it? It's one of those, it's all about your why. That's really, and I think that kind of sums up this topic, emotional eating, as well as what, anything we do, it's about your why. As long as your why is true to who you are, then that's what you need. That's where you can be comfortable with it. But we really always have to look at what are the things that are driving us to do whatever the habit is that we're doing, healthy or not.
That makes sense. Cause I feel like too, like I understand the, like going back to like, don't treat yourself because you're not a dog or not using food as a reward. But like even the terminology behind that, I would rather say I'm treating myself than saying I'm cheating.
I absolutely, I so work hard. I work so hard with my clients. And I can't stand, I am so with you. I can't stand, because cheating to me, it's like you've done something in your soul that's such a horrible thing. And it's like, oh no, that's so not what it is, because it has this very negative connotation, and it puts people in this place of just feeling poorly about themselves. And we have plenty of opportunities for that to happen. We don't need that to be involved with our food and our just our daily survival.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I'm curious, you mentioned that you lost a sibling because of an eating disorder. Is that like the relationship is ended? Is that someone's passed away? Because I feel like that terminology could be either, and I've heard of both. So,
okay. Actually, I lost my brother to alcoholism. So it was, so addiction runs in my family. And so I really, and I don't, when I lost him, I'm trying to think of how many years ago that was. It was about 16 years ago. And I was probably, I had just kind of come to terms, because I started, I can recognize now I had an eating disorder when I was 16. I didn't even own it to myself until I was probably 32. Like I didn't even say, I just thought it was just what you did. This was how this is how I managed to eat and stay relatively the same size. And that was just, that was what I did. I didn't really think that much about it. But then when it became this all-consuming kind of, it was altering my life and altering the way I was interacting with people. That's when I knew that there was and it was altering how I was interacting with myself. And I knew that was when things needed to change. But yeah, no. So addiction is very, very prevalent in my family. And
Mhm.
so it's one of those things that I've now come to realize is something that I always have to be very, very cognizant of.
Okay, got it. Would you mind, just in case someone can hear this and recognize themselves in what you're saying, would you mind sharing a little more about kind of what you recognize retroactively, I guess, or retrospectively about how your behavior was problematic and how you were altering?
Sure. I've had 3 different bouts of therapy with 3 different therapists because I kept wondering why why did I get so upset with myself? Like, why did I let gaining 2 or 3 pounds, like, why did I let that? I mean, that destroyed my world. Like there were times I couldn't go to work. Like there
Wow.
was, I just like, I can't go to work. I don't have anything to wear. People are going to know, what are they going to think of me?
Mhm.
And I had such a warped body image, and then also a very unrealistic viewpoint of of what really people cared about. Nobody cared what
Yeah.
was going on with me.
Right.
You
Everyone's
know,
so wrapped up in their own.
yeah, exactly. I mean, for some reason, I thought I was really important, that everybody was going to notice and everybody was going to talk about it. And so it wasn't, I remember I was in Denver. I had just gone to Denver for a half marathon, and I would run the half marathon. It did not go very well. And I remember that. And I remember being in a Barnes and Noble and picking up a book, and it was called Breaking Up with Ed. And I was like, Breaking Up with Ed, what's this about? And Ed is a term for eating disorder. And I
Yeah.
hadn't known that at the time. And I started reading it, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is totally me. It's like,
Yeah.
I thought, I'm keeping this thing around because it's very familiar for me and I'm very comfortable with it, but it's not serving a purpose. It's not helping me move on with my life.
Mhm.
And so the things that I was recognizing was, again, was the very extreme reactions that I had to any kind of weight gain or overeating. I mean, it was just,
Mhm.
it would devastate me.
Yeah.
And I remember, and I write about this in the book, I remember my last therapist that I had, who was just amazing.
Mhm.
And I remember going into a session, and I was just so frustrated. And I came into the session and I said, I don't know what's wrong with me, but when is this going to stop? Because I am so tired of this. I'm so tired of this
Mhm.
up and down. And she looked at me, and she was just the sweetest woman. And she looked at me and she's like, I am so sorry, but did I not tell you this is never going away? And I looked at her and I went, what? I go, are you kidding? First off, I wanted to say, okay, I think I need my money back. But
Yeah.
I was like, what do you mean it's never going away? And she said, this is a part of who you are. Like, this is a part of your personality and who you are. And the more you fight it, the more it's going to keep rearing its head. You've got to embrace it, and you have to learn. It's not about getting rid of it. It's not about making it go away. It's about learning to manage and have strategies so you don't become so devastated when this kind of thing happens. She said, because I'm sorry, there are going to be times that you're going to be so good, and then there's going to be something that's going to happen. And she said, and it's all about your reaction and how you choose to handle it.
Mhm.
And at first, I was really mad. I was like,
Yeah.
that is very unsatisfying. But
Yeah.
then what I recognized was it was this wave of relief came over me, like, like, oh my God, I don't suck. Like, I thought, I kept
Yeah.
thinking, like, I'm so bad at this. Like, why can I not do this? And I realized, oh no, it's not about me working harder or being better. It's about me accepting and fully embracing exactly who I am,
Mhm.
and running with that and being okay with that. And that was kind of the beginning of just finally seeing that who I was as exactly as I was. And we always talk about, oh, you have to love yourself before anything else is going to happen.
Mhm.
And I always think, oh God, how can you do that? But it absolutely 100% has to happen. You have to embrace every aspect of yourself, and you have to love every aspect of yourself if you want to make any kind of change. That
Mhm.
change has to come from you being kind to yourself, and being just that sympathetic, empathetic, warm blanket to yourself. And too oftentimes we're not that way.
Yeah. So was she right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Because it's funny because when you initially said it, I thought like the same thing that you said, that like, man, ask for your money back, go find a new therapist. But
Yeah. but it really was, because, and then once we started really talking about it, and then we started talking about the things, and it was actually very, very close to the timing that my brother got sick. And I thought, gosh, it makes sense, because this is a food addiction for me. This is an issue. This is a problem, that I use food the same way an alcoholic or a drug addict uses drugs. And so I thought, I think she's right. I'm kind of in a 12-step program where it's just, you do what you do what you can, and you learn strategies, and it's really one day at a time. And there's still days where things don't go the way I want them to. And I'm okay with that now. And I can still be, I can be kind to myself. I can let myself be human. Whereas before that was not possible. So it's a very liberating and very freeing place to be. But I also know how it can be very confining, and you just feel like you're in a prison, because you don't feel like you don't know where to turn, and you're just so unhappy in your own skin. And it's no way for anyone to live.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I was going to say that it's short of the response that I was like, oh yeah, in a couple weeks it'll all be gone.
Yeah.
We just need to work a little bit more. Right. I imagine that the real answer could also potentially be quite empowering once you realize that you will nurture and build the skills to handle it, so that it doesn't devastate you all the time.
Right. Well, and you also then don't feel that sense of failure, like, okay, I should be able, like when you cure something or get rid of something, that kind of gives the impression that it's all on you to make that happen. And that if it comes back, then you've somehow failed. And so to be able to be given that gift of, no, this is who you are. And that's perfect the way it is. And just be okay with that. So it was wonderful. It was a nice gift. It took me some time to definitely embrace it, but I did.
Sure.
So. Yeah.
I love it. That's beautiful. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So you've mentioned, it's so interesting because depending on who's listening and their interests, this could have gone two very different ways. And you, like everyone who's on the show, pretty much, you've made multiple bold moves that I don't think I've ever interviewed or met anyone where it's like they've done one bold thing and then the rest of their lives they just kind of so it's not surprising.
Exactly.
But with overcoming an eating disorder, with writing a book, with completely changing careers after being like a generational path with that. Right. I'm curious about the scariest moment or scariest thing that you've ever done, what that was. Quitting the job, admitting, there's so many. Wow. Or it could be something you haven't even told us about yet.
I would say the scariest thing for me was telling my parents that I was writing the book. And because the book is very, very much about my childhood. Yeah. And I was I was afraid. I mean, I knew I wanted to. I'd already made the decision that I was going to do it. And then after the fact, I thought, oh, wow, wait a minute. Maybe you should tell mom and dad, because they're going to be central characters in this whole thing. And so I remember thinking, I hope they're going to be okay with it. Yeah. And I spoke to my mom, and my mom was like, oh, and you need to write about this, and you need to write about this. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I guess you're all right with everything. And she said, oh yeah. She said, she was so sweet. She said, your father and I did the absolute, she said, every parent does exactly what they think is the best thing for their kid. And nobody wants anything bad to happen to their children. Right. And we all do what we do in the best possible way we can. And sometimes you don't know how things are going to be interpreted. You don't know how what path a person's going to take or how a person's going to read something. And so you really have to, it's one of the things I write about in the book is I just say parenting is and I am not a parent, but I watch my friends and I watch my
Sure.
parents, my own parents and
Students,
other
children,
people.
yeah.
And it's like, that is the hardest job. And there's no manual. Nobody tells you how to be a parent. Nobody tells you what the right thing is to say.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I investigated as a part of the book was the whole process, which I think is so interesting because I have nieces and nephews that are babies. And
Mhm.
the whole idea of when we're a baby, we cry when we're hungry. And when we don't want the bottle anymore, we don't take it.
Mhm.
Where do we lose that? Where
Yeah.
as human beings do we lose that, where we don't have that instinctual ability to be able to turn off and say, okay, I'm done. I mean, some people do, but a majority of the population doesn't.
Right.
And where do we lose that? And one of the things that I think, and I found this research so interesting, was even something like a mother mentioning to a girlfriend about, gosh, I really need to cut back on bread. And her 3-year-old daughter hearing something like that and then thinking, oh, I shouldn't have bread then either. In their, in their own little minds thinking, well, wait, what's wrong with bread? Why shouldn't I have that? And we don't give children enough credit for really picking up on those things. And it's so unintentional and so, not what a parent wants to do, but it's
Mhm.
like those things happen. And so for me, the scariest thing was telling my parents and then them, being incredibly supportive and just, it ended up being a really great thing. So.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're definitely blessed to have a couple of amazing parents raising you,
Yes.
since that did go so well. Obviously, you couldn't predict and didn't know what to expect when you were going to tell them, or else you probably wouldn't have been afraid if you had known how it was going to work out. How did you push past that fear and do it? Especially since you never, it's not like you've had a lifelong calling to write this book. It's all been happening pretty quickly, but obviously you felt it very hard on your heart to do so. So how did you push past fear in that moment? And then, especially since you are a coach, I love always asking people just advice on pushing past fear in general, just in case somebody else is scared to do something else and can benefit from your wisdom.
Sure. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the gentleman who was being interviewed said, I never want to have, I don't want to come to the end of my life and feel like I always took the easy way. And sometimes the things that scare us are the harder things, but they're the things that are going to reap a much bigger reward.
Yeah.
And if you can really think about one, giving yourself enough credit that you can handle it. And I think oftentimes we let fear create our identity and we forget how strong we are. And I think that's especially true with women. I think we really are, it's so easy to think, well, I could never do that. Well, why not? Why not? And I don't ever want my life to be where I look back and I say, oh gosh, I took the safe route and I was okay. I was mediocre. I don't want to be mediocre. I don't want my life to be okay. And I don't want it to just be happy. I want to have lived my life fully. And so for me, fear is just a part of that. And I think that really, it really has to come from believing in yourself and trusting yourself to not only know that regardless of what happens, you're going to pick yourself back up and you're going to move on. And that's, I think sometimes it's that what are other people going to think if it's that fear of what are other people going to think if I do this and it doesn't work out. Well, who cares what other people think?
They probably don't care either and don't notice.
Exactly. Half the time they don't. And if they do, it's about you. And so I think, realizing that anything that's scary is probably going to be pretty worthwhile. And so as long as you believe in yourself, and I think the thing that I'm still working on is that things aren't always going to go smoothly. And I still have to work on this. Like, you know what? I'm going to come into some obstacles. That doesn't mean I quit. It means,
Right.
okay, let's figure out another way. It's not someone saying, oh, see, you shouldn't have done that. It's okay. Let's think about it. Let's figure out another way. Let's do a workaround.
Yeah.
And I know for me, I still have to work on that, reminding myself like, no, this is just that test that I'm being given to see how strong I am. And so I would say, just again, believing in yourself and just knowing that regardless of what happens, you're going to be fine.
I love that. Well, we've talked a little bit, or it's come up naturally in what you're saying, both self-love, self-compassion, believing in yourself. Do you have any tips or advice to give someone who is trying to work on those things and build that up?
Absolutely. Thank you. It's a great question. I am such a believer in, excuse me, I'm such a believer in a morning routine to start your day. I probably read The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod 10 years ago. And then I did it for a little bit and then I fell off. And then I've probably done it consistently for the last, I'm going to say 2 years. And my life has, since I started my business, and my life has significantly changed because of it. And the real core of that is that those affirmations and gratitude, and just really recognizing what you bring to the party. Every person, we are so quick. I forget who it was. Somebody was talking about this the other day. Like, what happens? Like when we were, 11 or 12 years old, you like to talk about yourself. You like to talk about the things you were good at. And then somehow there gets to be an age where it's like, oh, you shouldn't do that anymore. Like we should talk about what other people do well. It'll make you seem like you're bragging.
Right.
And then we stopped saying it to ourselves too. And so I think having something every day that you do that becomes a regular part of your day. One of the things my cousin does, and I love this, is she puts her affirmations on index cards and randomly places them like in a cabinet or by a light switch, or she has them all around her house. And I have my clients do that as well, that you always have to be reminded of the incredible person that you are, and that can't come from the outside. It has to come from you within. So I really believe that the best thing to do is to have something that becomes a regular part of your day, that is a routine, and it just becomes automatic. My day does not go the same if I haven't done my little morning routine.
I love that and appreciate it. So you mentioned The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. You mentioned Jen Sincero's work. And then, of course, you've written a book, which you've just mentioned, but you haven't given the title of. I would love to know more about your book and where you can find it. And then any other book recommendations you have apart from the 3 that you have already just naturally mentioned.
Sure. My book is called When Food is Your Drug, A Food Addict's Guide to Managing Emotional Eating. It is on Amazon. And my goal with this book was just to get it out to as many people as I could, to give people, one, a sense that they're not the only ones. If this is a problem, that you're not the only person who's dealt with this. You're not alone. And I want to inspire and help people learn to manage it. So the way and I know you're a former teacher as well. So being a former teacher, I created the book. It's an interactive journal. So it is what we used to call in California. We have many of the teachers in my district were trained in the New York Reading and Writing Project, which was very interactive reading. And so we would do these things called stop and jots. And so that's what I put in the book. It's what I know. It's what I taught for 17 years. So there's some text and some narratives, and then you stop and you're asked some prompts, and then you get to write about it. Writing is such a powerful vehicle when it comes to getting emotions out. And that's kind of the basis of the whole of emotional eating, is we keep these things bottled up inside. We don't get them out. And then they need to be fed. And that's where this all comes from. So it's very interactive, and people can go at their own pace and do what they want. They can read it straight through it and not do the journal writing, but they can't, they definitely do that with the journal.
Yeah.
I provide one-on-one coaching I have my own one-on-one clients who are going through the same type of thing. And then I have a group program as well. The book I want to get into as many people's hands because I want people to be able to do this on their own as well. So what I want to offer to your audience is I would love to give my book away for free. So
nice
I
of
would
you.
love for them to, if they're interested in buying, and I'm a book reader. I'm not Kindle. I love Kindle. Kindle's great, but I like holding a book, and I like writing, and I like writing in books too. So I would love to give your audience a paperback copy of the book.
Wow, that's so generous of you.
Just have to pay for the shipping, and so I definitely would love that. And they can get in contact with me. I have my personal page on Facebook. I also have a business page on Facebook, Kristin Jones Coaching, and I'm on Instagram, KJonesy44, at KJonesy44. And then I also would love for any of your listeners, if anything that I've spoken about, if any of that resonates, if they want to jump on a call and I can give them some next steps of things that they can do to kind of get themselves moving in the right direction. Like I said, I don't wish having issues with food on anybody. And I would really, I feel like this has been given to me so I can then help others learn how to deal with it and cope with it and manage it and have it just be a part of their life, not their entire life.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being so generous in that regard. And I'll definitely have all of those links in the show notes too, so that it's easy for people to find you online and get those books. Were there any other books that you wanted to add to recommended reading lists?
I first saw a life coach, I'm going to say about 5 years ago. My life coach actually took me through the process. It was related to some money issues that I had. And she took me through the process that was based upon Brene Brown's work of acceptance, forgiveness, and then rewriting your story. And so I took that and I had that as a part of my life coaching for money. And I ended up taking that and kind of crafting that into the program that I have for the emotional eating. And so I still have ongoing issues with money and my ability to feel that I'm deserving of money and that sort of thing. It has a lot to do with where I was raised and that kind of thing. So one of the books that I absolutely just discovered that I love, and there's so many free resources out there that are connected with this book. It's Get Rich, Lucky Bee by Denise Duffield Thomas, and she has a website that has so many free, a lot of manifestation, a lot of law of attraction type of things, but so incredibly, it's another empowering book that makes you realize that every single one of us on this earth is deserving of whatever it is that we want. And we don't need to play small. We need to go for whatever it is that we want in life and not settle. And that goes for all aspects of life, whether it's your health, whether it's your relationships, your job. We need to realize how powerful we are and that it's possible for every single person. So that book is wonderful. And again, as I say, she has a lot of free courses and things like that on her website. So
yeah, I'm a fan too. I love that book.
Yeah.
And I agree. She does. She gives away so much.
She really does.
In regards to that, I know she has courses as well, paid courses, but she does a lot of webinars and has a lot of downloads. And it's super cool. I love it. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
You've given away so much great value so far, just like in our conversation and, talking about what you're passionate about and where you have so much expertise. I always love to ask, in addition to the book recommendations, if there's any lessons that you want to share, any advice that you'd like to give, or any message that's just on your heart to give out to the listeners and readers that you haven't had the opportunity, that hasn't come up naturally.
Sure. Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to say one more thing. I think somebody asked me if I could put the message that I wanted to convey in my book. What was the message that I really wanted people to get out of it?
Yeah.
And that is, and I really want to reiterate, it's about taking care of yourself. We just don't do enough consistent self-care.
Right.
And consistent is the key word. It has to be that every day, 5-10 minutes of just, in my program, I call it me time, and it's me time, and it's about you, and it doesn't benefit anyone else. And it is amazing how nurtured you can feel when you are giving that kind of thing to yourself, because then all you have is that goodness to give. We don't, I think if everyone in the world did more me time, or everyone else did more self-care, our world would be a vastly different place. And I think that it has to start small and just go from there. So I would say to all of your listeners, take time for yourself, figure out what it is that makes you happy. And if it's like getting your toes done, or giving yourself a foot massage, or taking 15 minutes to sit in a bath, or I always tell people, go in the closet and read a book, to put the kids in front of a video for a minute and just sit and relax and have it be about you. I think that your world, when you make that a daily part and you take care of yourself, your world will change significantly.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I'm so glad that you said that. And while I'm so glad that self-care is becoming more prevalent and we're going a little bit away, at least from the hustle porn, I call it, of just like grinding, you can't be successful unless you wake up at 4 a.m. type of mentality. I think that's so key, and making it consistent. And I think that's such a great message, and it's not selfish. You're able to be a better mom. Like, you might not feel great about what you said, putting the kids in front of a video for a few minutes, but if that makes you able to be more patient with the children later and not yell at them for something because you snap, or, any number of things, you have more energy to play or whatever, like, it's not selfish. It's how you take care of the people you take care of. You can't do it unless you take care of yourself first.
Absolutely. It's like there's a reason why that oxygen mask comes down, and you have to put it on first before you help anybody else. And it's because we cannot help others if we don't help ourselves first. And that's so hard. And it's so hard specifically for women to do. We just have such an issue. The 3 rules of me time in my program are: it can't benefit anyone else. It can't involve any kind of electronics at all. No electronics. Has to be completely you and yourself, whether it's going out for a walk. And the last thing is, you can't feel guilty about it. So
I love that. Those are great tips for sure. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Right, so my last question for you, and I think this is particularly interesting coming from someone who was raised by teachers and then eventually ended up doing that and then changing things. But if 8-year-old Kristin had a crystal ball and you could see into your future to where you are today, and then, you probably have some plans of things coming up the next weeks, months, maybe years, but the foreseeable future, what you can predict, on a scale of 1 to 11, how excited would little Kristin be to see where you are now?
Oh, she wouldn't even believe that was something that was going to happen for her. I would say 11. She would,
Love it.
she would be so surprised and so happy and so, just would be so anxious, would be so excited about this happening. So absolutely. Yeah. That's a great question. That's awesome.
Thank you. I think it's so
11.
fun.
Yeah.
And I had an interview early today, and for the first time, I've done, almost 140 interviews, I think, by this point. But for the first time, she said, and you have to think about an 8-year-old's standards and mindset. And like, it's not like it's so much easier to impress an 8-year-old. And I think it's cool to get back into that mentality of like, you know what, this is really cool. And like, I might be a little jaded by looking at, especially the highlight reels on Instagram of, what people say they're accomplishing without showing any of the hard work to get there.
Right.
And so to get back into that whole idea and, how cool what we're doing really is, especially like coaching wasn't so much of a thing when I was 8. So when you were 8. And so it's like, I love it when people have jobs that didn't even exist. Cause I was like, okay, you probably use Zoom and Facebook and technology, and that didn't exist when we were 8. So even just being like, you're going to spend a Monday morning Zooming and you're going to be able to video chat. It's like, okay, I've seen that on, Star Wars.
I think she'd be excited about the fact that I was doing something that mattered to people. And I was just listening to, again, I've been big into podcasts lately, and I was just I don't know if you've ever heard the seven deep, the 7 layers deep, the 7 questions where you keep asking the why. You ask someone what their why is, and you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And I was listening to this in the car as I was driving yesterday, and I realized what my why was. And it's so interesting that you would ask me about my 8-year-old self, because my why is I want to matter. Because because when I was young, I didn't feel like I mattered. And so that when you said that about the 8-year-old, I was like, oh, she's so excited because I matter. Because like, oh my gosh, you got to be on a podcast. Like you got to be like, you're going to be on the internet. What?
Yeah.
And so that 8-year-old part of me is like you matter. Like that's what we wanted. We wanted to matter. So thank you for that. Of
course.
That warms my heart.
I love that your warm heart warms my heart. And it's funny that you brought up your why, and it makes me feel better that you found it recently, because I used to be part of an MLM or a network marketing company, and they're always like, your why should make you cry and all that. And I'm like, I have no idea what it was. And of course, with that group, it was mostly moms whose why was their children, and I'm not a parent yet, so I'm like, I don't have that. I have a cat. Are you
exactly?
I loved him, but he wasn't my reason for being.
Right. Exactly.
So I actually found my why when I was reading Jen Sincero's other book, You Are a BA at Making Money.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I just need to prove to myself that I can. Like that's my why right now. I believe that it evolves, but that's my why right now. And
absolutely.
So, so cool.
I love that we are totally Jen Sincero fans. I've actually seen her. I actually went and saw her speak. She's amazing. Yeah.
I was going to, and she sold out really fast in the LA area. Where in California are you?
I'm about 45 minutes outside of San Francisco in a little town called Danville. So,
I've been to Danville.
Oh no, get out.
Yeah. Really? Yep.
Oh my gosh. That's such a small world.
Absolutely. I lived in Palo Alto, Mountain View area for a few years. So when I was up there, I ventured around.
Yeah. So yeah. Oh, that's great.
That's like Northeast, right? Like the north part of the East Bay.
Yes. But yeah. Where you are. Yeah. You were in the South Bay. So yeah, you had to come up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Gotcha. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for what you're doing in the world. You do matter. And I'm so glad that you discovered that and that you are helping so many people. And then I really appreciate all of the generous, just giving you have for everyone who's listening who wants the paperback or the session. That's so lovely of you. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And thank you for taking the time. I so thoroughly enjoyed this. And I'm going to keep watching your podcast, because I learned so much. So
thank you. I'm so glad.
I hope that you enjoyed that interview as much as I enjoyed having it. I also hope that you take Kristin up on her super generous offer with the book and the session. Either or, I think, would be very, very helpful for a lot of people. And it's so wonderful of her to give that to listeners. If you're looking for that, or you're looking for Kristin's information or links to the books that she recommended, please head to boldmovespodcast.com. That is where you will find it. And hopefully you'll find that helpful resource. While I'm asking you to head places and do things, of course, I would also love it if you you subscribed. That way you won't miss an episode, including this Friday's challenge from Kristin. I also would love it if you shared this with anyone who you think would find it educational, informative, entertaining, inspiring, useful, or just good, something good in their lives. I also would love it if you could leave me a review on iTunes. Of course, I prefer 5 stars so that it helps other people find this podcast through Apple's algorithm. But I would also happily accept an opportunity to learn if you have some constructive criticism for me and would like to leave that for me there. You can, of course, find me on my website and Instagram and all the social media if you'd like to as well. I'd love to connect with you. All right. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, be bold and have a sparkly day. Bye-bye.